to invite Johnny and Maylee up to the stage because we have a very fun conversation on creating a globalized email program, which has plagued me in the past as someone who needed to translate messages into, I think at the time it was 7 different languages, and I found it very difficult. So I'm excited to hear from the two. Hi, how are you both doing?
Hey
Doing well.
Naomi.
Happy to be here and loved the break.
I'm Oh, good. I'm glad. I think it was very refreshing for people. I'm going to pull up our slides. If you can't see the slides, it's now time to shout. All right. I'm going to assume that everyone can see our slides completely fine. So this
Yeah.
next session, I'm so excited to be here with Johnny and Maylee. We're going to talk about implementing a global email program. And before we do that, I would love to pass it over to you both to do an introduction into just who you are. But why don't we start with you, Maylee, if you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I'm Maylee, and I'm here on the growth marketing team at Notion, managing lifecycle programs where Johnny and I work to help our users navigate our program and be on a happy customer journey.
Yeah, and I'm Johnny. Been at Notion for a couple of years now, doing something similar. And historically, I focused on helping users discover new use cases and converting to our paid product. And localization has been a really important component to help our global audience do all those things. So excited to get into it. Thanks, Naomi.
Of course. And for those that aren't aware of Notion, I am like number one fan of Notion. It is involved in every aspect of my life. I have planned my upcoming wedding in Notion. I organize my finances in Notion. I write my daily honey-do list for my partner in Notion. And I also use it for work at Customer.io. I have everything in Notion. So email copy, strategy, the Unpacked outline, including all like the speaker details pages in Notion. And it is just this amazing collaborative tool. Do you guys want to explain what Notion is further than that?
Yeah, of course. I think we've crafted Notion to be the place we hope you can do your most important work. So it's amazing to hear that you're doing a lot of that, Naomi, at work and at home. I think it's where you can write, plan, and organize and execute all of your projects and ideas in one AI powered workspace. We want it to be a place where builders can build what matters to them.
Yes,
While
well
you're doing
said.
it.
And if you haven't checked us out, please do.
Amazing. Okay, so I've pulled together a couple stats on your global email program, but do you want to just give a quick overview into what your global email program looks like based on this slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So, because we have 80% of our users outside of the US, a global email program is an absolute must for us. And right now, we're localizing all of our marketing in 7 languages. We have 12 in the product, so it's still a work in progress. And we've seen some really powerful results, specifically within the onboarding world, which is my funnel focus. We've seen amazing traction with better engagement, better activation rates. I think it comes as no surprise, but having a consistent experience from the product to marketing is really something that's important to our users and something we strive to have for as many markets as possible, as often as possible. And we couldn't do it without our incredible partners, both internally and externally, because it really is an all hands on deck initiative to localize. So we'll get into it in all of the following slides, but I think that's our high level.
Love it. These are some pretty impressive stats, especially the one on conversion. Okay, so the first stat that I want to talk about is the fact that 80% of Notion users live outside of the US, which is pretty cool. I'd love to know more about how has supporting a global audience increased or changed this dynamic since you have localized campaigns? Have you seen a larger increase in individuals outside of the US join the platform, or was this kind of a pinnacle metric that made you realize, okay, it's time for us to kind of create emails in different languages?
Yeah. I think global demand came first, is the short answer. And we've been intending and doing our best to serve them as we go. Something that I think a lot of people don't know is international audiences have always been top of mind for our founders. In fact, two-thirds of our founders learned English as a second language. So they are very interested in serving a global audience and ensuring that everybody, no matter where you're from, no matter what your culture is or your language is, can build in Notion. Another funny anecdote from early days of Notion, actually a very painful time of Notion's history. The two of the co-founders went to Japan and rewrote the entire code base to get away from the hustle and bustle of Silicon Valley and kind of like their American centric background. They wanted to explore something new. And so I think that mindset from very early on and the this idea of like the empowerment of tool building has really resonated with international audiences. And so during Notion's like viral growth periods, each of those moments have had like really strong global components. So that demand has come first. And so we've had to invest in ensuring that people in France, Japan, Korea are ready and able to engage with our marketing. And as we do that, we see that it pays dividends. So we keep it going. We see the usage, we see the community engagement, we see, of course, product usage and conversion to paid plans. And like that's what we're trying to do with this business.
A question similar to chicken before egg, or however people word that one, but was your product localized in different languages first and then email marketing followed, or is it email marketing first?
Yeah, product typically is localized first. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of that for us, and we can get into this about how we support kind of different numbers of languages across both, is product localization can be a lot more automated with the tools that we have set up and the amount of developer resources that are available, and marketing kind of follows. So we can talk more about how we split that up.
Mhm.
All
Yeah, and
right.
I think also if we see traction in certain markets, those are kind of the
Mm.
indicators that we use to guide our investments, and really understand where the customers that we want are starting to use Notion. And as marketers, that helps us make a case for investing more in localizing in those languages.
That makes total sense. And this is a good lead in to our next question, which is how do
Yeah.
you decide which languages to prioritize?
Yes, absolutely. It's a really hard question and a really good question because ideally, again, we would be localizing everywhere all of the time to give our users the best experience. But we're a lean lifecycle team. We're three people in total, and we're serving a really big user base. So thinking about each of our pieces of content and those already being segmented by the many different types of users that we serve, and then multiplying that by over seven for everything is enough to already kind of make me start sweating. And so we actually take a really programmatic approach to our prioritization overall. And we have a tiered system for both our launches and our languages. And so for our kind of tier one markets, which have been established for Notion by looking at where we have the largest user bases or where we have the most potential to grow, we localize pretty much everything all the way through. And then for additional markets, we kind of look at that more within the frame of our launch tiers to really establish whether it's something that we as marketing geeks are just kind of excited about, like a new piece of help center content that we want to get in front of more people, or whether it's something like a new AI feature that all of our users need to know about. And we need to be able to explain it as thoughtfully and impactfully as possible. So I think we still aspire to be able to broaden how much we localize for each one of our launches. But for now, I think really having that tiered programmatic approach helps us move really quickly and is a place where process helps actually speed us up instead of slow us down. Because oftentimes I know people hear like the rules can feel a little uncomfortable, but it's definitely something that I would recommend as folks expand their life cycle programs to localize.
Yeah.
I feel
And
like that's a
we've
really good call out.
we'll talk about it a little bit more later on. And you may have noticed earlier in the slides, in the product, we support 12 languages at the moment, and we localize marketing into 7 to 10. Kind of depends on the tiering system that Meili is talking about. So, another important thing for me to think about, because I've been at Notion for about 4 years, is at the very beginning, I think this number was like 3 or 2. So there's a lot of investment, a lot of changes over time have like helped us scale here. Um, and it's driven by like the demand that we're seeing from our users for sure.
That makes sense. What are the seven languages and what are the three that sometimes get localized?
Yeah. So what are tier one languages, Meili? You remember?
France, Germany, Korea, Japan. Number five is evading me. Was that only four?
Well, and then
There's only four.
we've got two
Then,
Spanish versions,
yes,
Latin
Spanish
American
for Spain,
and
Spanish for
Castilian.
Latin America. Yes.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and then
and then
Portuguese,
Portuguese.
which is a really exciting one for us actually, because we have had Brazil act as one of those markets where we're seeing a lot of organic growth,
Oh,
that startup scene starting to grow, a lot of organic community adoption, and um, you know, those kind of influencer online personas really taking Notion, creating great educational content, and helping the product grow. So that's definitely a market we have our eyes on and want to be able to localize more.
Yeah, and then some of the
makes
other ones
sense.
are German, Nordic languages,
Yeah, the Nordic
Chinese.
we're working on. I'm sorry, we have those as our three additional from 7 to 10. That is the Nordics sometimes are localized.
Love it. Love it. I have always been so interested in how Notion has expanded into different markets. And I think it's such a good case study on how community adoption can absolutely like blow up the reach of a company, right? If anyone loves a podcast in the audience, the Lenny's podcast on Notion's community growth is like one of my favorite ones to listen to that they've ever put out, just in terms of like how Notion has been able to grow so authentically in kind of like a B to C to B strategy. So
Yeah.
very, very interesting. Speaking on some of the two languages here, you all saw a huge increase in some of like the conversion you were seeing in the French and Korean markets after localizing. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of it's pretty straightforward that reading things in your own language goes a long way. Um, if you are an English speaker and you see something come through in Japanese or Korean, to me, it just looks like chicken scratch. Like, I don't even have a concept of what it might look like. Sure, like Spanish or French looks a little bit more similar. Um, so that just helps people engage with the content. It helps them actually see what we're trying to do and accept the nudges that our marketing is driving. So it drives them to convert into the product and to convert to paid. And another thing we found is some cultures and countries have an affinity for particular products or use cases. So another example that's not listed here is we've seen really strong adoption of our AI products in the Japanese market. And so we always make sure to localize everything that has anything to do with AI in Japanese. And as we've scaled the company, we have some like in region marketing folks who live in Japan and they drive marketing more broadly. And we collaborate on wholly unique things for the Japanese market regarding AI in particular. And those emails look very different from what are sent to like a US centric or a European centric audience, all the way down to like formatting and template. So that's kind of the maximum version that we'll do is we'll collaborate with somebody who lives in region. But everything along the way of just translating, of making it more culturally relevant, of trying to make content a little content and imagery more local to the audience, all of those things make a difference in driving engagement with the product and conversion to our our paid products.
I love it. That's very interesting. Oof. Okay. My trauma of localizing comes from team dynamics in the past. And at times it can feel like there's a million cooks in the kitchen. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but how do you work on this entire process with those around you?
Yeah, I can lead on this one as well. Um, it's changed a lot over the years. When I started, we were just like one or two lifecycle team members with a single contractor externally who managed some translators. And over time, we've grown to these numbers you see here, where we have 5 people internally, 3 on our lifecycle team, 2 on our international experiences team that coordinate a small army of external contractors, translators, and tools to make it all happen. And I totally empathize with the feeling of crossed wires and what's going on and yada yada yada. It can be really challenging. Actually, dog fooding our own product has been one of the strong solutions to this, just meaning that we have built our localization kind of hub inside Notion where we manage all the translations for anything that needs to be done manually. Things that are done in the product just kind of happen automatically, but there's so many things for marketing in particular or sales or other go-to-market functions that need to be processed manually through our team, through the international experiences team, and get them through the engine of tools and contractors. And credit to Virginia, especially, and Juan, who are on our international experiences team, who built that system. It makes it so much better for us to easily interact with getting this done and assigning ownership and cleaning up a lot of those like crossed wires that you're talking about, Naomi.
I maybe am feeling like it should be turned into a Notion template that I can access myself.
Not a
I think
bad
that's
idea.
a good idea.
What I do. I like the sound of it. I think other people would as well. All right. Okay. Do you have any like recommendations, advice, practice patience, improve your communication? Any words of wisdom for working with a lot of different people?
I would say the documentation piece is really key. I mean, obviously, we're a bit biased as folks coming from a software that really helps with documentation, but I do think having a robust system where you can track changes, where you can understand the why of how things happen for different variants, not only helps to serve just smooth executional process, but also learnings moving forward. If you're getting the same feedback for certain languages multiple times in a row, you can have your kind of learnings baked in as you're moving forward. But I love the template idea, and what our team has built is pretty impressive. So I think we'll have to talk to them about that.
I think
I love it. I'm a biased. I love templates.
another really key fundamental principle is cutting out the middleman wherever you can. The additional playing telephone is very hard. It always delivers poor results. So if at any moment we can get the person who's actually building the email in touch with the person who's translating or delivering
Mm.
the new content, it's absolutely essential. I think this is another important shout out to one of our partners. We use an excellent agency to build a lot of our emails called Scalero, and they work in customer IO. And Carla and Ilse in particular have been amazing partners that we can trust to directly interact with the international experiences team and a lot of the other kind of tools and contractors externally. So we can like kick off something with that template, that system that I talked about. And then we're really confident that we don't need to be involved as a middleman or a coordinator. The system and the process can like deliver the right things at the right time. And then um, our friends at Scalero get the job done.
Love it. Shout out to Scalero, and Carla's in the audience. So thank you, Carla. All right. Now tell me about your execution and workflow. What does this actually look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the ideate phase for us kind of falls into two buckets. One is more on the go-to-market side when we have a new feature release. And the other is more of the evergreen world, things like our onboarding content, our usage-based trigger messaging to nurture folks along as they're exploring the product, all of the wonderful monetization sends that Johnny has created over the years. And for launches, I think we're pretty much all hands deck. And again, more in that programmatic go to market world. So I will actually focus a little bit more on where lifecycle gets to play. And that's very much this evergreen world. And for that, I think the stage of our program of being kind of, we've reached 0 to 1, and now we're really hoping to get that 1 to 2 plus phase down kicks in. And so we really start to look at the different content we're sending and identify the gaps of where we haven't yet localized. And that is informed by a lot of the things that we've covered on seeing product traction in different markets. So if we know that AI is really popular in Japan and we really want to double down on better, more robust education there, we want to actually go beyond just the 1 to 1 translation piece and really start to talk with the marketing leads that we have in Japan, which as a larger company, we're fortunate enough to have those touch points. But really to understand the way that those markets are kind of talking about the product, what features feel like they're really resonating, how our users are actually using it, and working on kind of our next iteration of testing from there. And so that gets us more to the create phase where we head to our lovely tracking system and kind of partner on not only just translating the current content that we have, but making it more robust, making it more tailored to the market, and then actually getting the translation process going from that kind of secondary brief. And for all of our translations, I think we'll get into it a little bit when we talk about tools specifically, but there's kind of that initial pass. A lot of it now is done with AI, and then it goes off to a real human translator who adds their touch. And then we kind of circle back in with our leads who can flag if anything looks strange or feels off brand for Notion. And then on the assess side, we're lifecycle marketers. We love to AB. We love to ABC plus. So a lot of it is done with testing, where to be able to really measure the impact of our first step of just translating, and then if we're really getting better results based on investing a lot more in the content side and kind of the local context side, working with different markets, we'll try and set up tests whenever we can to really get a benchmark for not only what healthy engaged email metrics look like, but to see how we can better impact feature adoption and ensure that the education we're presenting really works well for our end users and is hitting that mark. So yeah.
Did I hear you correctly that you've kind of weaseled in AI to help move things along in the middle there?
Yes, that is correct. And so oftentimes the initial pass, we have a few different softwares that we've experimented with over time, but that initial pass that our wonderful localization team, our international experiences team does is with AI. And that has been something we're still exploring. The landscape's really moving quickly, but for speed, I think it will be an absolute game changer in our ability to localize more. Yes. And shout out to Customer IO and you, Naomi, for the tabs in campaigns, because that has also been something that makes the management of it much easier.
Thank you. I will take the praise and pass it along to the rightful parties because I unfortunately had no involvement in it, but I'm going to take it anyways. I'm going to take that as praise. Now, you've kind of touched on this a little bit. In-house translators, external agencies. We talked about the AI-assisted translation tools. What have been some of the pros and cons and like learnings you've had over the time that you've been working on some of this globalization work?
Yeah, Millie, do you want to lead here and kind of pick up your train of thought?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is pretty much yes to all of the above. We are using in house translators, external agencies, and AI assisted tools. And I think overall, kind of the pros and cons of the approach are the investment in setup for us to be able to integrate some of these AI tools. That's quite a bit of time, ensuring that all of our emails stay beautiful as they're translated and nothing breaks as we're trying to be more programmatic about it. And I also think on the content side, just ensuring that the time investment is worthwhile. Of if we're essentially doing rewrites on all of our content to ensure that we have local context, we have to make a strong case for it. And so that's where the testing piece really comes in, and being able to prove out conceptually this really is impactful and worthwhile. And so I think we take that on kind of a case by case basis. But that maybe is where the pros and cons weigh a bit of more time is a con, but better results are the pro. And we're always trying to find the right balance between the two.
Yeah, and I think that balance is often driven by, frankly, the volumes of the particular audiences we're dealing with. So if you think about the like full customer life cycle, you can think about it kind of left to right or top to bottom. At the top, there's a ton of people who are signing up for Notion and who are onboarding and who are experiencing Notion for the first time. And as you move through the amount of people who highly engage with it, who commit to it, who decide to pay for it, at the bottom of the funnel, those numbers are much smaller. And Notion has a large audience, so we often have the luxury of having decent sized audiences to serve, even at the bottom. Um, but even at Notion, there are times where there's just a few hundred or a few dozen people who are going to get a particular email in a particular language. And so we have to make a judgment call, like Maylee saying, is it worth the time and effort to try and make a difference here? And oftentimes it is, and sometimes it's not. And so we just have to make that evaluation as we go.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now we have about like 2 minutes left. And so I think you've basically answered this, how you adapt content for different cultures. But we could either focus on this question or this very fun one, which is if you were starting this from scratch, what would you do differently? And I almost think that this one is more fun to answer.
Yeah, let's do it. If
Do
we
it.
were starting from scratch, what would we do differently? I don't know. I feel like I did start it from scratch in some ways, and I don't remember how it went. Bailey, do you have any ideas top of mind?
That's a great question. I think ultimately I joined when the program was already pretty well established. So maybe I came in when the bumps were already smoothed out a bit. But overall, I think that cutting out the middleman, that point of Johnny's kind of is quite important, and ensuring that we're working more directly when we can. And I also think just being sure as marketers, we're taking off our Silicon Valley blinders and really trying to understand our different markets. I've had near misses of only including Apple MacBook shortcuts for markets where there's very low Apple usage. So I think really understanding your markets and like trying to ensure that you're checking those biases early in the process is also good.
I have two notes of a real answer for you, Naomi. I deflected earlier. But one thing is the talent density of your localization partner or team, meaning like how excellent are they, made all the difference in the world. And when I think about starting our journey from scratch, part of why nothing immediately came to mind is because we had a particular employee, Virginia, who is just the best. And she shoveled so much shit to make localization happen. and make it work well. And so, if anything, she made it work for us at the very beginning. And so, if anything, I would have loved to be able to advocate for more tools or more automations so that so much of the manual work didn't have to be done. So much credit at the very beginning of our localization program goes to her, because she allowed us to just like think strategically, make these choices about what's worth it and what's not. And the rubber hit the road and like actually executing the coordination through her. Um, and so that combination of like finding excellent partners, whether that's an employee to run it, a contractor or an agency, they can really make or break how this goes. And any opportunity that you have early on to get Eng resources to build connections or find a tool that can integrate with Customer IO, that makes life so much better.
Love it. So basically, if you don't have a Virginia, you're out of luck. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
If
Don't
only we
do
could
not
clone
poach her.
her.
Do not poach her.
Virginia. Love it. Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining me today. I think I will still carry the trauma of my past localization projects, but it is good to hear from a team that seems like they've got it together. It definitely seems like you've got it together. And it's really cool that you are kind of expanding into the Nordic languages. So it will continue to grow. There were a couple questions that came up in the Q&A. So if you do
Yeah.
have a couple minutes, once I kick you off the stage to go check those out and maybe drop answers into the chat. I think we've tackled the first one, which was around challenges that you ran into. But any tools or translators, if you have any links to share, I think that would be super helpful for Leslie. But thank you
Yeah.
both so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks,
All right.
Naomi.
I will
Yeah,
see ya.
excited to
later.
tune into the rest. Bye.
Yeah, love it. Okay. Bye bye and bye bye.